there's just so much news that goes on in you and I discussed that what we'd like to do is hit on some of those newsworthy items, but try doing them in like a 3 to 5 minute segment, just in case you missed it. So our new segment is going to be called "In Case You Missed It," and what we'll either do is we'll have videos or we'll have articles or websites that you can see of things that are going on in the news that affects us all. Some of it will be national. Most of these this week are national, but they're subjects that are going to hit home, and some of them eventually will be local. But let's get into the first one. The first one is I couldn't believe when I saw it this week, that because it was the Air Force, and you and I were both in the Air Force, and they had the four-star general in front of Congress, basically saying he was at the full committee hearing in the Department of the Air Force for the fiscal year 2024 budget, and they were discussing how some recruits in the academy came up with a slide about how you can't say mom and dad and how it's some sort of offense thing. So let's watch this video really quick. We'll discuss it really quick, and then we'll get on to the next.
General Brown, I do have to ask you a question that sort of stems from what Ms. McLean was asking about. She showed you this curriculum from the Air Force Academy, and she asked you why the terms mom.
Okay, really quick. I know I stop a lot. Sorry, people. Really listen to what this general says, because he's trying to make this seem like it's a leadership thing. And he says it a couple times. And then later they talk to the Secretary of the Air Force, and he basically throws the general under the bus and disqualifies everything this general said. And when we're done, we'll talk about it really quick, and then we got to move on because, like I said, I want these to be quick. But just listen to what this general says.
And you said that you're working to build cohesive teams. So just wondering, how do the terms mom and dad impair cohesive team building?
Part of leadership is understanding the people you're privileged to lead. And as you have that opportunity, you get to know them. And every one of us grows up differently and has different experiences, different backgrounds. And we can't assume when we engage with them. And so from that perspective, you've got to to build that team and to build that trust with our airmen, and in part because that trust is part of the cohesion that gives you the strong team to be able to go execute what the nation asks us to do.
I understand better than most that families at times aren't defined by blood or even paperwork, and I know you have to recruit folks from different family environments into the Air Force. But do you think maybe it puts downward pressure on recruiting some of the people who do have moms and dads and do use the term mom and dad, if in the curriculum of the academy it seems to disfavor those terms?
No, I don't.
And what's your basis for that belief?
Because I think part of leadership is dignity and respect of those who are privileged to lead.
You don't think it disrespects people?
I do not.
You don't think it disrespects moms and dads when they send their young children, I guess, becoming adults, into the academy, and then they see that mom and dad are disfavored terms? Do you agree that mom and dad should be disfavored terms?
I think we need to respect the fact that they have either parents, grandparents, aunts, and uncles that sometimes raised young people.
Sure, but I mean, I know folks who've been raised by aunts and uncles, and none of them have ever told me that when they hear someone else call their parent mom or dad, that upsets them. Do you know of people who feel excluded when others refer to their parents as mom or dad?
I don't, or either way, whether it's aunts, uncles, moms, and dads, I have not come across anyone.
If I could,
Sure.
The point of that slide, I'm familiar with it, came out of the Air Force Academy. It was actually created by cadets for training, and it's not very artful. But the point was that you shouldn't, it was not to diminish moms and dads. It was to just make people aware of that particular family configuration, not the.
I don't know, Mr. Secretary. It says that you want to use parents, caregivers, or guardians instead of mom and dad. So when you say instead of, it kind of does seem to disfavor. And I appreciate not every slide is perfect, and if you're saying this isn't artful and we're not going to try to disfavor mom or dad or make people feel bad, I think that would be progress to hear.
You're correct. It wasn't
Okay,
artful.
great.
I don't think they're using that slide anymore.
And one thing the chairman and I certainly would not take exception with is that you seem to favor the term y'all. So no objection there.
So much to say to that video, right? Like, so if you listen to that general really quick, like I said, we're gonna go through these really quick. He's like, you can't assume, and to have strong teams, you have to build and everyone get to know anybody. But if anyone was ever in the military, and you know, some other stuff came out about the having trouble recruiting people, is the military had this saying, service before self. I love that saying. I think a lot of people in the military love that saying, because what that meant is when you put the uniform on, you didn't care about what the other person thought, believed, background, nothing. You were a brotherhood or sisterhood. You work together and fight together to finish a job. Now what they're doing is they're like, well, you can't say this, and you come from a different family from this, and you're creating division in an organization that there should be no division. And the answer isn't, well, leadership calls. No, leadership calls for you to sit there and tell people, listen, we have a job to do. Put your differences aside. Who cares if he has a mom, dad, aunt, uncle, grandparent that raised them? Who cares? The job is the job. And if you struggle as a cadet in the Air Force Academy because someone says, I have a mom and you had an aunt growing up, maybe you're in the wrong business.
It's a solution without a problem, but the result of it is it's causing more problems. And like you said, the number one issue that the military is having problems with right now is recruitment. And obviously the COVID vaccines are a big part of that. And now the military, to a lot of folks that I've talked to, has been almost been regarded as like a joke when these things come up. It reminds me of when my college got rid of the word ombudsman because they felt ombudsman was offensive, but the word ombudsman has nothing to do with a gender identity. No. And it's just like, who is really not succeeding in life because of the word ombudsman? It's an absolute joke. And it's people that were on the fence about joining the military or not, I think are going to have a clear decision after seeing a clip like that.
Yeah. Well, so like I said, we're trying to move quick. So the next one I found was absolutely hilarious. And we've discussed in previous videos how politicians love to change words or come at things differently to make it seem like they're not doing what they're doing. And, you know, so I think this was just really, really typical of politicians. When I saw it, I laughed. I hope you guys, well, don't laugh because it's actually pretty serious what they're doing. But we just need to start identifying and calling politicians out when they start changing words, changing definitions, and being dumb. I don't want to say the S word, but they're being dumb. But let's watch this and I can discuss it really quick. Watch my hands too, because I'm going to do some funny things. I'm going to beat.
Chad. Thank you. There are new provisions in the House now for members to get reimbursements for rent and utilities and meals and things. We understand how tough it is to pass a pay raise here, but is there a concern that some in the public might interpret this as a pay raise? Are members getting something extra on top of this, and is that politically a problem?
No.
Why not?
It's a reimbursement.
But talk about that. Shouldn't people perceive that as an issue? I know that was something you argued for back in December.
The effort to make sure that members are reimbursed for housing expenses has been bipartisan in nature from the very beginning. It's a bipartisan recommendation from the House Modernization Committee. There was then a bipartisan unanimous vote taken by the House Administration Committee in late December of 2022. There was a bipartisan process working with the nonpartisan CAO to develop procedures for the reimbursement mechanism to be appropriately implemented. And then another bipartisan unanimous vote was taken at the end of March.
Okay. So here's the deal. This should be like a new rule, right? If you're a politician is going to be doing this on a big scale, we should probably not elect those people. Do you understand what I'm saying? And the stupid thing about this is they asked him, they were sitting there saying, hey, listen, would you consider that a pay raise, that you're getting benefits? And he's like, no. And well, why isn't it considered a pay raise? They're getting their rent paid for. They're getting these fees paid for. They're getting all this other stuff paid for that wasn't getting paid for. It's not a pay raise because it was bipartisan. But if you look at my hand and I do this, just trust me, it's bipartisan. So it's not a pay raise. We got to get rid of these people. It's like they're playing politics, and you see it all the time. That would be a disqualifier right there. Be your damn self. Sorry, be yourself.
Yeah, I've done a lot of planning and budgeting for different organizations, and one of the first thing that we always look at if we ever have to scale back is looking at the total compensation that we're paying folks. So, for example, as a sales employee, usually, at this particular company, there was a cell phone bill attached to that. There was travel, there was meals, there was a car reimbursement because they had to travel for their job. So it's like all these things were part of their total pay. And if it really going into the COVID lockdowns, we were at a place where we're like, well, all right, we have to start trimming some of our costs because of this event that's happening, and we're going to lose business because of it. And that's one of the first things we looked at is like, okay, how can we look at total pay? So to say that it's not total pay is just like a complete
real
really.
simple. I might go to my job and be like, I don't need a raise, but I need you to pay my rent, pay my car payment, pay my insurance, and all my meals. But I don't need a raise. These guys are crazy. They're out of their mind. So as we move on for that insanity, another thing that happened this week is the HHS secretary, his HHS whistleblower, went in front of Congress to talk about how the U.S. government is working as a middleman in a massive child trafficking operation. This blew my mind. I think they try sweeping this under the rug because, we have all this immigration issues that need to be fixed. And while everyone's sitting here and like, no one's illegal or no one's undocumented, there are actually kids and people suffering. So this is kind of upsetting, but just listen to what this woman says. It's unsettling, to say the least.
My goal is to inspire action to safeguard the lives of migrant children, including the staggering 85,000 that are missing. Today, children will work overnight shifts at slaughterhouses, factories, restaurants to pay their debts to smugglers and traffickers. Today, children will be sold for sex. Today, children will call a hotline to report they are being abused, neglected, and trafficked, and we don't know if they're going to get the help they need. I discovered that children are being trafficked through a sophisticated network that begins with recruiting in home country, smuggling to the U.S. border, and ends when ORR delivers a child to a sponsor. Some sponsors are criminals and traffickers and members of transnational criminal organizations. Some sponsors view children as commodities and assets to be used for earning income. This is why we are witnessing an explosion of labor trafficking. Now, whether it's intentional or not, it could be argued that the United States government has become the middleman in a large-scale, multi-billion-dollar child trafficking operation that is run by bad actors seeking to profit off of the lives of children. There is a Pandemic Analytics Center of Excellence, or the PACE as we call it. I believe if data analysts at the PACE could look at the data, children could be rescued, criminals could be prosecuted if the PACE had access to this data. It shows where the children are and who has them. We need to revamp the vetting process of sponsors and have case managers who have investigative backgrounds, data analytics backgrounds, some certified fraud examiners. And I think we need to reimagine a system where the sponsor is the accountable party. Sponsors should be required to report to ORR. And lastly, stop retaliating against whistleblowers. Stop retaliating against the people who are trying to tell the truth to save the children. As it is written, a wise man listens to advice, while a fool continues in his folly, and HHS needs to be wise to care for these children.
Yeah, so there's a lot in that video, and like I said, this just blew my mind. 85,000 missing children. We allow criminals to be sponsors. If you're a whistleblower, they attack you. I mean, it almost makes it seem like there's an actual reason behind this, right? It makes it seem like, hey, listen, people really don't care about these kids. People don't really care. We're like, hey, we're doing great things for these, people. Let them come to America. Yeah, they're working in slaughterhouses. They're being sold for sex. They're probably being killed, or they're being, hey, you have to pay your debt, so you have to work here free. One of the other things, I watched this video a little bit longer because, for time, I had to cut some things out. But I guess there's some kids that are coming that speak like a Mayan dialect. And because it's a certain dialect, like they don't understand Spanish too well, and obviously they don't understand English. So these kids are ripe because they have no way to communicate with anybody what's going on. And the only thing this lady's saying, the only thing you have to do is don't give them to criminals. Give the government access to some things that say, hey, listen, these people you don't give it to, these are how we're tracking these kids, this is what's going on, and we could fix a lot of these issues. And instead, don't be a whistleblower. It kind of almost seems like there's a reason this is going on, and I hate to say it that way or whatever, but this needs to be fixed. Plain and simple. These are freaking kids. Like all these people that care, all these people that go down the border, get to a chain link fence, and have a picture taken of them crying because kids are in cages and there was no cages there. Now there's actually kids missing, and where are these people? Where are they?
Yeah, it's very sad. It's something that you would traditionally associate with like third world countries, and it reminds me a lot. So a great book out there, it's called In Order to Live by Yeonmi Park, and this was the book about this girl who grew up in North Korea, and at the time they were human trafficking North Korean girls into China because of the one-child policy. A lot of families don't really either kill the girls, or there's not as many because they want the boy to carry the family name and whatnot. So there's a shortage of girls in China, so they would import a lot of children from North Korea. And she documents her her whole story and how pretty much throughout the whole process everyone was taking a cut of her journey in there, and luckily she was able to escape into South Korea. Now she's in the US. But yeah, it's very sad. It almost, as you were talking about that article, it kind of reminded me of like prohibition in a way, where like the government banned the sale of alcohol, but they were still very much involved with the transportation, the distribution of alcohol, where they were kind of the middleman, and they would be the ones that would kind of look the other way, or like, as long as you were kind of giving them payments on the back end, they would they would allow you to continue your operation. So except instead of alcohol, we're talking about human lives.
Yeah, human lives, all for money. It's crazy. So one last thing we'll do is again, hopefully some of these things get people thinking, maybe get people in a call to action, or maybe just tell people, watch this show or go out and learn more about this stuff, because we need to be educated. Too many of us, and myself included, up until a couple of years ago, you're just living your life. But I think when COVID hit and you start seeing a lot of things, you realize there's a lot of bad stuff going on in the United States, and that needs to be taken care of. So the next thing we're moving on to, and a final thing in case you missed it, this week the House Education Committee held a hearing about school choice. I found it to be a very informative discussion, and this is one of the best parts from it. So
can you just talk about a little bit about that from the eyes of the most important, and that is the student?
Yes, thank you, Congresswoman, for reorienting us to the student question at hand today, because it is all about students, and we do not want students trapped in unaccountable public schools. But if we look at Catholic schools in particular during the pandemic, you're absolutely right. Private schools were much more likely to reopen much quicker than the district schools, largely because teachers' unions kept those district schools closed. If we look at Catholic schools, they opened much quicker as soon as they knew it was safe to reopen, when the science showed that it was safe to reopen schools, and the result has been pretty phenomenal. There was a piece by Kathleen Porter McGee in the Wall Street Journal recently, and she found that if all Catholic schools, all 1.6 million children in Catholic schools were a state, they would outperform every other state on the NAEP in math and reading. And so they gained, low-income kids in particular, minority students in Catholic schools gained 10 points in reading over the course of the pandemic, when students across the country actually lost 3 points in reading and 8 points in math. I mean, this is a phenomenal story to tell about how Catholic schools thrived.
Well, Dr. Burke, let's not let the facts get in the way of good story over here. So, Mr. Messer, can you talk more about what the polls tell us about support for school of choice across the country in my last minute remaining?
Yeah, I mean, overwhelmingly, we live in an America today where we agree on almost nothing, right? But we all agree on school choice. Poll after poll, 90%, 80%, 70% of Americans support school choice, Here's three simple concepts. One, no child in America should be forced to go to a failing or unsafe school, and every parent should be able to move their child if their kid's in that kind of school. 80% support across America. It's not fair that only wealthy parents get to choose where their child goes to school. 80% support all across America. Schools should focus on the basics, not pushing a political agenda. Parents should have a right to send their child to a different school if they think their school has gotten too political. 80% across America, including, by the way, 80% of African American parents who support that same point of view. If this was about what the American people want, we'd have universal school choice everywhere already.
All right, so there you go. I found a lot of that interesting, right? Obviously, they're for school choice, so people like, oh, those people for school choice, they're going to show their statistics to skew it to what they want you to believe. But, I mean, the numbers are the numbers. And as the Congresswoman said, don't let the facts get in the way of a good story. But it is a good story. The facts are the facts. And I think what happened, I was actually having a discussion with someone today, and they were wondering why, like, parents are starting to get an uproar about all these different subjects that are going on in school. And I said, well, thank God COVID happened, because that gave an insight of what was happening inside of schools. And a lot of people didn't like it. And I think what's happening, the reason why it's 80% is because people look at their schools and they saw what happened with teachers union saying, don't open the schools. And we got to teach this and we're not teaching that. And there's schools that are lowering the bar, and you don't have to test for math anymore. You don't have to do this. There's whole school systems. I forget what city it is. Maybe it's Baltimore, where not one kid can read like a fourth grade level in high school. And you sit there and these schools are failing, and you have political figures that'll sit there and tell you it's more money, it's more this. No, what it really is to focus on what really matters, and what really matters is the student. And I think what happens is we're fighting against a teachers union who wants the status quo, and they want more money. And if you give us more money, we'll solve your problems. Well, I'll tell you what, they've been asking for that for years, and things are getting worse. And I think most people are realizing, well, hey, listen, if you give me my money back and I can go to this private school, my kid's going to get a better education. And I think a lot of people are starting to realize, if, hey, the government gave me my money back and I could put my kid in a school and there was real school choice, that, you know, a lot of these political agendas, a lot of these things that don't matter to the education of your child would go away, and actually schools would start competing, because now they had to actually compete for dollars, right? They don't have to just sit there. We get paid no matter what, and we're gonna go there, and our teachers union every year we're gonna ask for more money. No, what they would be like, hey, you want to come and spend your dollars at our school because we're gonna provide you with a top-notch education. And I hope it gains steam. I'm sure there's a lot of states it's going to take a long time to happen, but I know there are states that are starting to pass laws that they're funding students, not schools. And I hope that keeps going, because I want schools, you know, to stay in business, but I also want them, I said business, right? I also want them to be more like a business and say, how do we get these children where they're supposed to be? Right? Get them to be productive citizens that actually can think critically and can actually do things that we require in the 21st century.
Justin, we just passed ballot question 1 here in Massachusetts. We're not going to have any funding issues related to schools ever again. We just passed graduated income taxes. It's going to go 100% to education and 0% anywhere else. So we're covered here in Massachusetts.
But if money solved the problems, we wouldn't have problems. And I tell you what, Massachusetts, I'm not going to lie, Massachusetts does have probably some of the best schools in America. But when you're the best of what, the 19th ranked schooling in the world, that's like, oh, we're the best of mediocrity. I mean, that's where we're going to. Like, the United States used to be #1 in education. Now we're like number 19. and we keep slipping, but yay, we're the best of number 19. I mean, that it blows my mind. And I think people are starting to realize that. And like I said, I think COVID-19 really exposed a lot of what's going on, and we need to get the politics out. We need to get everything out there. Like, I don't mind like teachers going in there and trying to teach kids to be critical and bringing things up. But if they're bringing up subjects and they're not letting kids be able to critically talk about it, or they're saying, listen, 1619 project is true. And I'm like, well, can we discuss this? Because it's not. Can we actually discuss the realities of what went on in history? Can we say math isn't racist? I mean, when the heck did math become racist? Right? So I think a lot of people are starting to look at schools different, because I think the assumption is, and it's horrible because this always happens, is everyone looks at things they've dealt with through their lens and their experience. So all of us that graduated school and high school, when we went through, we're like, hey, it wasn't that bad. I learned a lot. Well, that was 20 something years ago or more for me. And things have changed. And we have to recognize that they changed. And what we should do is, as I always tell my kids, like, things should get better. Kind of like we said with Earth Day, like, we should want things to be better. They're not better. They are not better. Study after study that's coming out is kids are so far behind. They don't know how to pay attention. They don't know how to do math. They don't know how to read. These are the people that are going to come up and take care of us when we're old. And I don't think everyone's sitting there looking at that. And I think we're heading for problems unless we fix this soon. And I think school choice might be a way to solve some of the issues we're having.
Even in my town, this is the lockdowns and the effect that it's had on kids is one of the number one issues that they're talking about, and how to get them back to the place where they were. And you actually touched upon another really interesting topic, where you have two parts to the school system. It's one, you have the content and the quality of the education, but then two, is it sustainable? And that might be a good topic for another show, because I think there's a lot of people that don't realize a lot of these school systems with the pensions and everything, they're not healthy financials behind a lot of these school systems. So there's going to be a lot of people who think that they have lifelong pensions that are going to find out in a few years that a lot of those pensions are underwater, and they're not going to be promised the full stream of income. So I think it's not only to make sure that the quality of the education is great, but also to make sure that they're on financially sound ground, to make sure that they're sustainable into the future as well.
All right. Well, that was in case you missed it. Those were like 4 things I thought like people would like to hear about, see a little bit about. Like I said, comment below or reach out to us on Facebook or Twitter or the Justin Thurber Show if you would like to like us to go more in depth on some of these issues. We'd love to. Like I said, we could probably spend 20, 30 minutes on each one of these, but we just wanted to give you a quick overview.